Morning, everybody. David Shapiro here with a breakdown. So, yesterday we had Microsoft with their Bing announcement and demonstration, and this morning we had Google with Bard and then some. So, let's break this down. In case you haven't seen it yet, there was a nice little demo of Bing where you can ask about getting a dog, and then you basically get a Chat GPT like output, but it does cite its sources, which is really cool. So I get the impression that there's a little bit more going on behind the scenes where they're probably doing integrating search results and citing their sources as they go, which is really good. Having using the internet as a source of declarative knowledge, good on you. There's still going to be gaps in this, but we don't have to take a deep dive into that. So if you get on it, you can expand it. I don't know. I don't know how broadly available this is yet. Of course, it's also just the first release. It's going to be improved over time. But as an initial showing, it's like, okay, cool. This is basically ChatGPT directly in your browser with citations sorted, or citations provided, rather, not sorted. Now, today, though, Google had their expected announcement of Bard, but they went above and beyond. So they had a lot on visual search with Google Lens as well as Google Maps. Both of those are roughly the same kind of thing where it's about being in the real world and more visual data. Google Immersive View in Maps looks incredible. So they use a new technology called NERF, or a neural radiance field. There's a great video on this from Corridor Crew, which I definitely recommend you check out. I think it was about 2 to 4 months ago. Anyways, I told a friend of mine about 6 or 7 months ago that neural representations were going to be the way of the future. We were talking about deepfakes, and then neural radiance fields come out, which is basically, I think that neural radiance fields are going to completely change the way that we do movies, film, TV. It's interactive as well, so this could change the way that we do games. I think the future is neural representations, and Google nailed it. They stuck the landing with the immersive view on maps. You can actually go in and walk through in fully rendered 3D any locations that they have with their neural radiance fields. And then they had these little opera singing blobs for their arts and culture aspect. And we'll get a little bit more into this in the future, but I also think that we are seeing the very beginning of AI-generated entertainment. The combination of generative AI in the form of large language models, text to image, text to video, text to audio. In this case, these opera singers are all completely synthesized. And then also neural representations for interactive aspects, such as neural radiance fields. We'll get a little bit more into that with a nice little hidden gem at the end of the video. So stick around until the end where I talk about where this is going. Okay, so I did a little poll. I did one on Twitter and YouTube. Now, there is obviously some bias in this because people that follow me are more likely to see this poll and reply. But on both platforms, Google was chosen as the clear winner of this fight, with 70% on YouTube and 62% on Twitter. Now, I have way fewer followers on Twitter, so this is probably a more fair representation, whereas my followers on YouTube are going to be familiar with some of my prior beliefs around cognitive architecture and so on, which is why I favor Google if I were a betting man. Now, so general consensus seems to be that Google has about a 2-to-1 advantage over Microsoft with Bing. We'll be curious to see how these numbers change after today. I suspect this is going to tip a little bit more in the favor of Google. One thing that came up in this poll, though, was that a bunch of folks were saying we are going to see a paradigm shift in the way that we approach the internet and web and so on. And I've had people recommend all kinds of things like we're going to see a new layer of abstraction where instead of websites, we're going to have a different like the chat or another kind of way of interacting with the internet. We're going to have entirely new AI experiences. There's going to be a third party, an underdog, maybe an open source solution. So there is some energy around, hey, maybe AI is going to completely change the landscape. I'm not sure that I am in that camp just yet, because when you look at the people that are best equipped to adapt to this change, it's going to be the ones that are, one, leading the research, and two, have the money to pivot. And Microsoft and Google have both of those in spades. Remember that it was Google who started this with their original papers on transformers back in what, 2016? And that has led to the current revolution. So they've been here for years. Microsoft is technically still playing catch up, although OpenAI is a little bit ahead, but in the grand scheme of things, Microsoft and Google are neck and neck in this technology. They are leading the charge and setting the tone. So I think that they are probably going to be the preeminent players when it comes to AI and neural networks, and particularly search, as well as some of these other technologies, such as the digital avatars and voice and image generation. Now, I did, however, start another poll based on some of those responses because I was curious. Is search toast? Maybe they're onto something. Maybe we will see the death of conventional search through, your search bar. It could entirely be that search is going the way of the dinosaurs. After all, younger folks these days, Gen Z, they're more likely to use TikTok to search, which that still blows my mind. Because it's like TikTok is a Chinese platform that is designed to be addictive. I don't know why you would want to use that for information foraging purposes. But hey, it is what it is. So anyways, the results here were mixed. Now, to be fair, there's only 162 votes total between these two, but they are opposite between Twitter and YouTube. So search is here forever. Roughly 50-50 with search is toasted. Maybe we will see a paradigm shift where people are just not going to use search anymore. Imagine, there's already people using Replica, their chatbot. Imagine that you have an app on your phone that is your personal information concierge, and all you do is chat with that. That's honestly what I want. I don't want to cruise Reddit, which is going to give me, depressing information and doom scrolling. I want to have a meaningful conversation with an intelligent entity that can tell me that one knows what I care about, nuclear fusion and mRNA and rejuvenation therapies and singularity and AI. I want to have something that goes and finds the information that I want and hand delivers it to me and can have a conversation. Now, Google News already does that. I get most of my news by swiping left on my Android phone, and it has a curated news feed that is already pretty well custom tailored to what I want to know about. So you slap Google Bard on that, and that is going to be the primary way that I interact with the internet. So it is possible that search is going the way of the dinosaurs. Search as we know it. Obviously, search is still there, but maybe there is something to this idea that we're going to have another layer on top of it. And then, of course, these tools cite their sources. So then if I have Google Bard or another, Bing or whatever that I'm interacting with, and I'm talking to it about news, the social landscape, whatever, what are my friends up to? What friends should I call today? Go read their Twitter feeds for me or whatever. It is possible that we're going to go that way. There's no consensus, which is really interesting to me. Is I thought it would be really obvious. People are saying no, AI is going to completely replace search, or no, search is obviously going to stay. If the results are this mixed, I think it's going to be both. Right? This is a false dichotomy. It's a false choice. But I thought these results were very interesting, so I wanted to share. Okay, so let's do a breakdown, a pros and cons view of Microsoft. So Bing had a good showing. They had a good live demo. It obviously works. It is a little bit on the slow side, which they addressed, or maybe it was some of the interviews addressed. I watched an interview with Satya Nadella, and he's got a very clear-headed approach to wanting to take a larger market share of search. And I think that Bing with AI will do that. especially since ChatGPT and GPT-3 are going to be integrated across Microsoft's landscape. They're already rolling out Teams Premium with ChatGPT built in. I have had the privilege of speaking with various teams and product owners throughout Microsoft. The entire organization at Microsoft is working on integrating GPT technologies. And so we are going to see business software very quickly pivot to be truly like 21st century or AI based. Microsoft has Windows, which runs desktop PCs, gaming, and server infrastructure. So I can imagine that businesses are going to really benefit from AI integration above and beyond just Bing. Now, another pro in the column for Microsoft is they can afford to lose the search war. Microsoft has so many other business segments. They are like a federation or a confederacy of business units, all of which provide value. Whereas Google is monolithic. I think it's 70 to 90% of Google's revenue comes from search. And we'll get into that in just a minute. Now, that being said, the cons on Microsoft's side is that it was a pretty anemic showing. They had basically one product. And it kind of felt like a half-hearted attempt. It really reminds me of Zune, where Microsoft has really, really always struggled to break into the B2C market or the consumer market. Think about their competition with Apple. Apple has had a very coherent consumer ecosystem for a long time with iTunes, iPhone, everything. Microsoft has really struggled with that. The only exception being Xbox, right, with their gaming platform and how central Microsoft Windows has been to desktop gaming, and then of course some console gaming. Of course, the console market is a little bit different because you've got PlayStation is still a major player and a handful of others. But you've also seen others go the way of the dinosaurs. Sega got out of the console. They only produce games now. So, anyways, that's kind of the high level overview, pros and cons for Microsoft. So now let's look at Google. How the last couple days, how does their showing stack up in terms of pros and cons? The biggest pro is they brought a huge portfolio of products to share. They addressed arts and culture. They addressed navigation, maps, translation, entertainment. They had so much going for them. Google has mobile. They have Android. Who has a Windows phone? I don't think they even make Windows phones anymore. So Android is going to be a huge, huge boon for Google in deploying access to these, whether it's Bard or any of these other things such as Lens, Maps. You can get by without a laptop or desktop today. You can get by with just a smartphone or a tablet, which means that Android is incredible for Google. Now, Google also has Chrome, the most used browser globally. So regardless of whether or not you're using a Windows Server or Windows Desktop, you're probably using Chrome. That or Firefox, right? I actually have some folks that I'm going to be talking to at Mozilla about trustworthy AI. So keep your eyes peeled for that video coming up, if they let me talk about it. Obviously, I honor NDAs. There's plenty of stuff that I know that I am not sharing because, I like when people share stuff with me. But anyways, getting distracted. Point being is Google has Android and Chrome, which that's a tough nut to crack. And I don't think that Bing with AI alone is going to dislodge Chrome, because Edge is like, okay, sure, but what else, right? Whether or not it's trusted, Edge is now the fastest way to download Chrome and Firefox, right? Or whatever else you want to use. So Google also has an established dominance in brand trust where it comes to search. We just trust Google results. And trust is one of those things that Google has managed to maintain when other tech giants like Meta, aka Facebook, lost trust and is now imploding. Ditto for Tesla. So Google has managed to maintain trust. To be fair, Microsoft has maintained trust as well, just not with some of their products, namely Edge, Cortana, because they have a long history of failed products that they just didn't really seem to invest in. Now, this is both a pro and a con for Google, is they cannot afford to lose this. So it is a pro in the fact that they can't afford to lose it, so they're going to go all in, right? Google will intrinsically put more energy and money into winning the search war than Microsoft will, because Microsoft can afford to lose it. So they might have a foray, just like how Zune tried to compete with iPods, and they're like, okay, well, that didn't really work. Microsoft did the same thing with Windows Phone. They wanted to compete with iPhone. It didn't really work, so they let it go, right? So the core business of Microsoft and Google is different, but because of that, Google really cannot afford to lose this war. Now, they also lost tempo and initiative. As I mentioned earlier, Google created the technology that is driving this revolution. They started this trend in 2016, which is what, 7 years ago, right? And this came back to bite them too. So one thing that I'm concerned about is, people in the alignment spaces are talking about this now, is that there's this frigidness that's kind of settling onto open source, which is the big players like Google, DeepMind, Microsoft, OpenAI. They have published research, and there's a lot of takers, both in the corporate space but also in the international space. And so I'm wondering if this is going to cause a lot of the tech giants to clam up and switch from open source to closed source, because something as innocuous as the transformer innovation and the loss signals, all the algorithmic improvements that allowed for the current wave of AI. What if Google had realized what they had 7 years ago and kept it all closed source? Like, that would be bad for all of us, but it would be really good for Google. So that's one thing that I'm concerned about, and that's why I posted that as a con, not necessarily for Google, but for all of us, is the possibility that we're going to get this really kind of hostile environment, and we're going to get rid of open source. So here's my personal conclusions. Google is the hands down winner up front for now. In the long run, the lines might break down over B2B, which is business to business, versus B2C, or business to customer. Microsoft, their core business has always been B2B software, business software. Google, they're better in the consumer space. So they might ultimately just kind of stick with their core business. Another takeaway is Google must go all in on AI. And that means pivoting their entire organization if they have to. They just laid off 12,000 more people. So, they're going to pivot. They have to. If they want to survive, they will need to go all in. Google has a much broader range of offerings on B2C, with their Android and Chrome platforms as one of the primary delivery mechanisms. But Microsoft has a much more comprehensive B2B portfolio with Microsoft Office, Server, Azure, and everything else. So again, they're probably going to end up playing in their own sandboxes, just as they have been. One thing that was missing from this was gaming and AI assistance. Why didn't Microsoft say anything about Xbox? Like, are they not gonna create realistic NPCs that you can have real conversations with? That's what I think is really missing from this conversation. So I promised earlier that we were going to touch on that. So here's the last 2 slides of this presentation. Keep an eye on NVIDIA Omniverse. I don't know why NVIDIA is not getting more attention. If you go watch their Omniverse videos for Audio to Face and their ACE, their Avatar Cloud Engine, it is super impressive. You combine the conversational ability of ChatGPT and large language models with this stuff, you add a little bit more sophistication in, you've got completely interactive avatars that can, be whatever you need them to be, whether it's gaming, whether it's news, whether it's teachers. Oh man, I've had some conversations with the folks over at NVIDIA. I am excited for them. I don't think NVIDIA yet realizes what they've got. And so I want to wrap this up with something that's a little bit more abstract for the infrastructure people, is NVIDIA's Unified Computing Framework. That is a really boring, bland name, but this is the underpinning technology that will allow for all of these other things to be delivered and matured and consumed. And so I think that NVIDIA might be that underdog that people were talking about on Twitter, because all the plug and play stuff, and I definitely encourage you, go look up NVIDIA ACE and UCF, watch the videos. This stuff is really impressive. This is going to allow anybody, so you see the low code design tools, sample applications, all of it is, they've got it nice and layered. It's got a nice graphical user interface, and it's also incredibly powerful. This is coming, it's coming fast, and I think that NVIDIA probably will be able to corner this market. But the biggest thing is I think that NVIDIA sees themselves as the underdog. They're very much acting like the underdog, where they're like, we're big, but we're not going to compete with Google and Microsoft. I think that NVIDIA has the capacity to carve out a huge, huge chunk of the market if they position themselves right and have the vision. So, thank you for watching. We are in the hilarious timeline now. Take care.